Attorney Phil Jusino, and this is the Phil Jusino Show coming at you from Strathmore Studios. Big Belly Barbecue is the sponsor of this show, the best barbecue on Long Island. Special guest tonight is someone I consider a friend, a former teammate. We played against each other in baseball. You were probably the best high ball hitter I saw. You pitched near his eyes and he'd knock the heck out of the ball. But it's Sheriff Errol Toulon. Welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me on, Phil.
And you said I can call you Errol, so I'm not being disrespectful.
No.
Instead of calling you Sheriff the whole show,
No.
since we go way back. Errol's people sent my people his bio. Now, if I were to introduce you stating all these accomplishments, the show would be over before I asked you the first question. So I knew you were an accomplished man, but when I saw your bio, very impressed. We're going to go through that. I'm not going to just rattle off your accomplishments, but as the show goes on, we're going to touch on a number of these. Now, the first thing I wanted to touch on is your background. So you were at Rikers for a while. How long?
I was on Rikers Island for 22 years on the uniform side. I retired, started in 1982, retired in 2004.
The year I graduated high school, long time ago.
Okay.
So we're both old.
Yes.
And then your dad was there. He's a pretty high-ranking officer there, correct?
Yes, my dad was a warden there, worked from 1962 to 1998.
Okay. And how did that experience help you when you became sheriff? Like when you were working there, you probably didn't have a vision in your head, I'm going to be the Suffolk County Sheriff someday. You probably didn't.
No, definitely not.
Okay. So you're going along, you're getting near retirement, right, at that career at some point.
Well, I retired because I had pancreatic cancer.
Oh, okay.
So I had a 10-year break before I actually came back to New York City. Had some issues with Mayor de Blasio and his administration.
I see.
Asked me to resign. Unemployed for almost a year until I was asked to run for sheriff 53 days before election.
Okay, right. And a late entry, I remember that.
Yes.
Now, how did that experience working at Rikers help prepare you for the current role as sheriff, second term?
Right. Well, finishing up, I'm in the third year of my second term.
Second term, right?
And I think one of the things when I was a young boy and I asked my father what did he do for a living when I saw him leave the house in uniform, and he said he was a New York City correction officer. And I said, well, what do you do? And he said that we rehabilitate men and women in jail. So, fast forward to now, I become the sheriff,
Right.
and I have this great opportunity to change the lives of those in our community and those that are incarcerated. Really gave me some focus when it came to the jail portion of the sheriff's office as opposed to, what the deputy sheriffs do to our police officers on the road.
Now, some years ago, before the show started, the pre-show, I said I had one of your undersheriffs, Steve Keyhouse, on, and he was talking about how old the sheriff or the role of the sheriff actually is. And you had mentioned a year in the United States. What year was that?
Well, the Suffolk County Sheriff's
Suffolk
Office
County.
was created in 1683,
Wow.
as I tell many people, before America was even America.
That's right.
Yes.
And but it actually goes back in England, the
Yes.
9th century, and I have to read it, but it is the oldest continuing non-military law enforcement entity in history.
Yes.
So it's such a long history. So that there's so many people that came before you. What was it, like 67? Are you the 67th?
Yes, I'm the 67th
I remember
sheriff.
that. Okay,
Yes.
the 67th sheriff.
Right.
And how long has Suffolk County? You said something like 16 something.
1683.
I can't get over that. Again,
Yes.
that was before America
Right.
was born, but
Right.
they had a sheriff.
They-
Now tell us a little bit. Like people know what a police officer does.
Right.
I don't know if everybody knows exactly what a sheriff does.
So the Suffolk County Sheriff, whoever he or she may be, is the highest ranking law enforcement person in the entire county. The Suffolk County Police Department only has the 5 western towns
Right.
of Suffolk County, where the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office really encompasses the entire county. So the sheriff has the 2 jails, oversees the 2 jails.
Yeah, Pank and
And-
Riverhead.
Correct. The deputy sheriffs now patrol the roadways in the east end of Long Island. We do the pistol licensing. So anyone on the
Okay.
eastern end
Mhm.
of Suffolk County that wants a pistol license, Those 5 towns, we will issue those. We have a warrant division, domestic violence division, Marine Bureau for the east end of Long Island, and our deputy sheriffs also transport
Wow.
incarcerated individuals back and forth to court or to a hospital if necessary.
Pretty broad jurisdiction.
Yes,
Because as you know, I'm an attorney, used to be a prosecutor, and I see the court officers, but you also see the sheriff's deputies that actually bring them from the jail,
right,
and then they hand them off to the court officers.
correct,
So you have both entities in, let's say, Central Islip building
right,
or
yes,
Riverhead,
yes.
where they bring them. So when you became sheriff of Suffolk County, what did you want to accomplish? I'm sure you had an agenda, obviously,
Right.
but what were some of your priorities?
My priorities were really to work with the youth, and also make us a formidable force in law enforcement. You know, there was a negative view of the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office when I took over, and I wanted to create a more positive view. I also wanted to make sure that we were very engaged with the community, and so that's been my goal for the last almost 7 years now. And I feel that more people understand and know the role of the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office.
Now, how did you bring about some of that?
Really, it was tireless effort on my part. You know, I've been in 1 to 2 schools per week since I started as sheriff, except during COVID. I've created a robust community relations unit to make sure that we're at as many events possible. When it comes to speaking engagements, if it's not me, it's one of my executives that's going to go out into the community and speak on whatever issue needs to be spoken to. So I think just getting us out there and pushing us forward has been
Hmm.
something I've been able to accomplish.
Right, and you've seen results.
You know, I really have. I think a lot more people think very favorably, not only of law enforcement, because we did have that negative view after tragically George Floyd was murdered,
Right.
but more importantly, people are starting to know who their sheriff's office is, who their sheriff is, and how we can better serve our community.
Now, one of the programs you instituted was START, right? And I saw that in your biography, and I heard of it. I didn't know you came up with that, but I was talking to my son a little bit about it, and my producer. And tell us a little bit about that, how it came about, and what good it does.
So one of the things I realized when I worked on Rikers Island, I started as a correction officer and finished as the deputy commissioner of operations, was that there was no mechanism or way to assist men and women who were leaving our custody. You know, they had the clear plastic bag. We dropped
Right.
them off at Queensboro Plaza with enough for 3 fares and said good luck. But what I wanted to do was change that paradigm of assisting men and women who are incarcerated so that when they leave us, because 85% of the men and women who are in the Riverhead and Yaphank facility are returning back to our community.
That's a high number.
They're not going to state prison. So why not, while they're with us, help them with the services uh, inside of our jails, or when they're returning back to our community, connect them with those services so that they're better prepared and know that someone cares about them and they can succeed.
What are some of those services?
So, educational opportunities, mental health services, substance abuse, employment, housing are some of the key, connecting them to their any clerics or religious figures in the community. So, you know, wherever they need is what we want to connect them to. So we create an IRP, which is an individualized reentry plan for everyone that wants to participate in our program. And what we do is see where they're at and where do they want to be, not where I or any of my staff
Right.
tells them, but what do they want to do in their lives. And we've taken it a step further by not only helping them, but we're helping the children of the incarcerated and also their spouses and family members.
It's voluntary for them, correct?
It's voluntary, and but more importantly, the men and women that participate in the program, our recidivism rate is 17%. The
Mhm.
state average is 40%. The national average is 60%. So we are seeing a lot more success in our program, which I know many people throughout New York State are replicating. But I know Virginia, Florida, and California have reached out to me, and I've spoken to them about our
Mhm.
Start Resource
So it's
Center.
been a model program.
I'm trying my best.
Hmm. Now, and you're not only helping the individuals that are incarcerated, but society, because when they go back to jail, it's because they committed a crime.
Correct.
Assuming they're guilty. But by so the recidivism rate goes down and less crime.
And the public is more safe because that's one less victim in our community if we're successful with that
Right.
particular individual.
And when did that program start?
That started March of 2020,
Okay.
right in COVID.
I was going to say right during COVID. Now, when did you first take office?
I took office January 2018, January
Okay.
1st.
So you're there a couple of years and then COVID hits.
Right.
Now, again, as a defense attorney, I know what that was like. Uh, you didn't have to necessarily bring prisoners to the courthouse, but you had to make them available, like virtual things
Right.
like that. What kind of challenges did you face when all of a sudden COVID, you know, COVID came and you had to make decisions, policy changes? How did you go about that?
So we prepared, January 19th was the first case in the United States in Washington State. March 1st was the first case in New York State.
Hmm.
March 8th or 9th was the first case in Suffolk County. We started preparing in February because when I was the deputy commissioner, I had to deal with H1N1. And I learned very quickly how a virus like that could move throughout a correctional setting. So we implemented some plans on how we were going to really shut down the jail. Also concerned about keeping our staff safe, because if they don't feel safe, they're not coming to work. They're not coming to
Right.
work. I have even bigger problems with our
Hmm.
incarcerated population.
Now, before the show, you said Suffolk County fared better than, let's say, New York City and Nassau. Explain that.
So as far as those individuals that were incarcerated that contracted COVID from March until the middle of December of 2020, we only had 3 cases that the health department, I don't report any
I
illnesses
see.
or sickness. The health department reports 3 cases of COVID amongst our incarcerated population, where in Nassau County and New York City, and especially Westchester County, experienced several deaths, not to mention, you know, multiple inmates who contracted the virus, but many passed away from it.
But why did Suffolk County fare better? Those are the numbers. Why
Right.
did they? Why were those numbers so low?
So we isolated every new admission inmate. We put them in a quarantine pod for 14 days. They were checked 3 times a day by our medical staff. Once they passed that 14-day quarantine, we were able to move them into general population. We limited our services, just the mandated services, but we spread it out throughout the day. We had sanitation supplies, multiple sanitation supplies throughout the housing area. Our jail was cleaned 2 to 3 times a day. And
Right.
more importantly, my staff met with the inmates in their housing areas to talk to them, because whatever they heard on the phone that they may have been talking to a loved one or friend,
Right.
or anything they may have watched on TV, could have really set them off in the wrong direction. So we had meetings almost daily with each housing area to let them know what we were doing, how we were doing it, and why certain things were being implemented so that they would also feel safe.
Now, for how long after, let's say, 2020, when COVID hit, did you still have protocols in place?
Almost 2.5 years, really. 22, almost 23,
Wow.
2023 and a half, where we had, even right now,
Like modified things,
correct. Even now, we have a 5-day protocol for all new admission inmates to make sure that they're not uh, COVID positive.
right? Because it's still out there, not
Correct.
as bad. But how did you deal with outside entities, people bringing in food, like you said, sanitation? Because you necessarily can't control who's.
Right.
But how did you deal with that?
We really spoke to the staff, and the unions are very instrumental in ensuring that we were all on board on how we were going to keep our staff safe, our medical staff, our civilian staff, and also the incarcerated population. And so, really, it was a collective effort to see what was the best practices. And our sick rate, ironically, was probably at its best during COVID, because the staff were coming to work, they felt safe. Uh, I would say the first year and a half, any staff member that did contract COVID, and basically they all contracted it on the outside, I called or reached out to, whether it's via text or phone call, just to see how they were doing and if they needed any assistance from us for them or their families.
Okay. So I guess you still have certain protocols in place because, like I said, COVID. Some people still you don't hear the big numbers, but you don't want that to come into the jail and spread.
Right. We still have the 5-day protocol for all new admission inmates.
Still have that. Okay.
Right. And we also encourage any staff, if you have any signs or symptoms, see a medical provider before coming to work and get a COVID test to see if you're positive or negative.
Okay. Now, one of the things you said the sheriff does has to do with the domestic violence cases.
Right. We have domestic violence, which we also deal with, ERPO's extremist protection orders. We also do evictions.
Right. So for my audience, if someone goes to family court or even district court, gets an order of protection, that's generally the sheriff's department that serves the defendant or the respondent, as opposed to the police. Because a lot of my clients don't realize that it's mostly the sheriff's department. Correct?
That's correct.
Right.
We have our own domestic violence unit, which is located right in the courthouse in Central Islip. So any orders of protection that do come through will come right to my staff, and we will act
Right on the
within.
first floor through the Megs.
That's
You
correct.
go in there because a lot of times I walk my clients down there,
Okay.
and they go in, and then somebody who works for you
Right.
gets some information, says what's the best time to get them, because they got to get them right away.
Exactly.
This is not like you're serving as a car accident.
Right.
You have to get that person right away, so you can get that, so you know for a fact they got it.
Right.
Very,
Exactly.
very important job.
Right.
Also, can be very dangerous.
Very dangerous. A lot of the things that are occurring that we're doing now. When I first started as sheriff, we were not doing extreme risk protection orders, which now, is a very hotbed topic, both politically and also
Sure.
because of persons' beliefs in their constitutional rights. But, it is keeping people safe, and it is mandated by the courts. It's not the sheriff's office just going and saying, you know what, Errol, meaning me,
Right.
we have to take your firearms. There's a court order, there's a due process
Sure.
that the person has to go before a judge, and the judge will evaluate whether to continue that or
Hmm.
go or not.
See, I learned early on when I was in the DA's office, 89, 91. I was in the domestic violence unit. They created this new because some women had been killed.
Right.
So they created that. And I remember speaking to the police officers, and I didn't realize the sheriff's office was that involved at the time. But how dangerous it is because you go to a scene, let's say you're a police officer or sheriff, you're serving, and sometimes, let's say the person who's getting the order can turn on you
Right.
because you're arresting their man,
Right.
their husband or their boyfriend or whatever. And you hear about across the country when you see these shootings, a lot of times it's domestic violence,
Right.
orders of protection or picking somebody up.
Or the person knows that the police are coming because their spouses went to the police and went to the courts,
Right.
and now they're waiting, and unsuspectingly, across the country, unfortunately, law
Right.
enforcement people have been killed.
And emotions get run very
Right.
high. Yes, it was very not a funny story. I can laugh at it now. My dad, we sent him on a serve, so he goes to serve this guy, and the guy opens the screen door, and he sicks a dog on my dad.
Oh,
Now my dad's 80, almost 87 now. He was younger, but he was still not a very young man, not
right.
as fast as he used to be.
Right.
He made it to his car, thank God.
Okay.
And to put a cherry on this story, the man went back in the house. I guess he got angry. He set on fire the papers my dad had served him. Because I told my dad to call the police. I said, the guy sicks a dog and you call the police.
Right.
The police really, I guess, didn't do much about it at the time. But when the house caught fire, my dad gets a phone call like middle of the night. And they said, what did you serve him? Because they found some of the charred paperwork.
Oh, okay.
He said it caught fire cooking. But that just goes to show you how volatile.
Right.
He's a process server.
Yeah.
Now you're going to send a law enforcement guy to do something a lot worse than to give the guy, divorce papers,
Correct.
where he could be or kicked out of his house.
That's right.
Right. If just is refrained from and there's a stay away.
Right.
If someone's going to be taken, they may feel they have nothing to lose, which is sad.
Right.
But very, very dangerous. Now I know that you had taken 2 trips to El Salvador. And what is the name of the jail? CECOT?
Right.
How do you pronounce it?
CCOT.
CECOT.
CCOT is the jail that wasn't in existence in 2018 when I visited. And I can tell you, I felt very unsafe. In 2018, there were 87 law enforcement persons killed in
87.
April of 2018. So from January to April when I was there, not necessarily in the line of duty, because one of the fears of law enforcement with MS-13 is the fact that they know who they are. Many of they don't call them correctional officers, they call them guards, wore masks, they disguised their voices, and it was basically, the prison was run by the inmates.
So the CECOT wasn't there when the first trip.
Correct.
What was the name of that jail?
I went to multiple jails, and there was no jail that actually held, these high-level MS-13 members, nor did they have the control that they now have under President Bukele with CCOT being built.
Now, also I heard 18th Street Gang. That's another. I'm
Right.
not familiar with that here.
It's here. They are here. They're a rival gang to MS-13, like the Bloods are rivals to the Crips.
Like in LA.
Correct.
Okay. MS-13 seems to be the one that gets top billing. That's the one we hear about a lot.
Right. So what they did in CCOT, they arrested, there was about 18,000 individuals in this one jail, all MS-13, all 18th Street, 42 cells in this particular jail, 21 on each side. Each jail held between 60 to 70 people. They can only wear their undershirts and underwear. There were only two toilets. There was a bathing area, no showers. They had no visits, no phone calls, no
Wow.
commissary,
Now, you
no
said
nothing.
you felt unsafe. Who did you go with on that trip, first trip?
Uh, Legislator Bill Lindsay,
Okay, so just the two of you, and I
right?
guess.
Two of us, and it was prearranged with the El Salvadorian government. I met with our U.S. Ambassador to El Salvador, Homeland Security, the El Salvadorian police, their military, and some of their elected officials.
Did you get to meet with, or at least through the bars, any prisoners? First time.
No, not the
Second
first
time?
time. Yes.
Okay, but let's go back to the first time.
Okay.
So you go there, and what do you see? Take us through
So
it.
they were so scared, meaning the administration, of allowing me to walk into the housing area because it literally looked like, and there's no disrespect, you were walking down probably one of the worst streets of Mexico. There
Oh,
was no control. The inmates were doing whatever they wanted to do in this particular housing area. So they had me in a control room where multiple cameras, multiple screens that I'm watching what's going on inside. And I have to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't have wanted to go in. I probably would have went in because of my machismo and I'm coming
right.
from New York City.
Might not have been the
But
wise thing to do.
yes, I was very skeptical. If they would have said yes, I would have done it. But so I watched everything from the outside in two jails. So now you fast forward to September of 2023. I go to CCOT, one of the first Americans to walk inside this jail,
Right.
and I see what I see. It cost $130 million to build. Over 9 months, they stopped all concrete production throughout the country
Just to build the jail.
just to build a jail.
Wow. Was any foreign money, or was it all El Salvadorian?
They never spoke about that. One interesting thing when you asked about did I meet any individuals incarcerated, I met two people. One was from Los Angeles County Jail. One was from Huntington Station.
Right. Because
I
I
was
read,
deported.
I read, read about that,
Yeah.
and it said there were some local people that had
Yes.
been there. Now they were gang members.
They were gang members.
Now the first time you said you were a little apprehensive when you went in
Right.
there. Did um, at that time you said how many jails did you see?
I saw two the first time.
Did they separate the gangs?
No, they couldn't. There was so many gang members, family members of gang members, not only who were inside but also out in the community. It was really horrific. The second time I wore my uniform. Everywhere I went in El Salvador, right out of my hotel room, into the hallway, elevator, lobby, into the street, into the police car, being transported wherever they were taking us on that particular day. I probably wore the Suffolk County Sheriff's uniform.
Now, why did you decide to make the first trip? Let's say.
I wanted to learn more about MS-13 from the boots on the ground. And, I could talk to law enforcement persons, I could talk to people in the community, but you don't get an understanding of MS-13 or El Salvador, which is truly a beautiful country. It have this mark of MS-13 in
Right.
18th Street, but it's a beautiful country with beautiful people. They just have this, they had that corruption issue with MS-13.
Now, how did you find the police there? Like in Mexico, you have the federales,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of corruption,
Right.
sadly. And some of them, it's not even that they want to be corrupt. They're afraid. They're afraid of what can happen. If you're a police officer in Mexico, you might be afraid. You make an arrest, and they take it out on a family member.
Right.
Did you find that there in El Salvador?
Uh, I didn't see it or experience it, but what little things I've heard was the corruption of smuggling in phones into the jail, smuggling in prostitutes into the jail, smuggling in food that was unauthorized into the jail because of the fear and intimidation that this
Right.
gang uh, does.
Yeah. And we take a lot for granted
Mhm.
how stable, let's say, America, certainly Suffolk County,
Right.
this geographic area, where I don't think a police officer is afraid I'll make an arrest and something bad can happen to my family. But in those countries, Mexico, El Salvador,
Right.
I guess, and again, you didn't necessarily see it firsthand, but you heard the stories about that.
Correct. And I do think because they've done such a good job is the reason why the economy is thriving. I'll give you a quick story. Uh, I had more things going back to the United States than what I brought. So I had to go and get an extra piece of luggage. And I went to a Sears in a mall in El Salvador and felt perfectly safe in that. And it was very clean, very bright, very new in
Hmm.
El Salvador. And you can see a change that President Bukele has done. I know that many people question his tactics because one of the things that they do is an MS-13 member. If you're identified as an MS-13 member, there's a state of exception, which means that you're guilty of the crimes that the gang has committed. You may not have done it, but because you're affiliated with
Almost
the
like
gang.
Rico.
Exactly. That's their
Rico.
version. So they're incarcerated, sometimes for very long periods of time.
Now, CCOT, obviously, it's a much better jail.
Right.
What kind of improvements did they make from the first time you went there to CCOT?
So it's a newer jail, which has it's more brighter. They have much more security inside than from the cameras that I viewed my first time. They're more tough. They're tough on crime, and they're tough on these individuals that they believe are gang members, and they label them as terrorists. That's why they were able to create the state of exception.
Now, how long are their sentences in general?
The individuals that I saw in CCOT were between 20 to 25 years.
That many years?
Right. They did have other jails in El Salvador where they lesser crimes,
Hmm.
and they are working for rehabilitation models with various trades that they're trying to teach them so that they don't come back to jail. But this jail was for the hardcore individuals.
Okay. And what did you learn? I know you spoke a little bit about that, but what did you learn from your experience going to El Salvador both times?
I think one of the things was a better open line of communication with the government. Because we're battling MS-13 here, specifically in Suffolk County, we have a direct link to El Salvador to speak to the police or the government about things that we may be finding. They've shared various information with me that was confidential that I was able to bring back and share with other law enforcement agencies so that we can all recognize potential signs that may be going on with MS-13 in our communities.
Hmm. Now, you said you took office in 2018. How would you say gang violence increase, decrease, about the same?
I would say that it's decreased. More gang members that were very violent when I took office in 18 are more involved in the drug trade. But I also think now with the collaboration between the sheriff's office, police department, DA's office, state and federal task force, there's better communication, open lines, and there isn't the issues that we faced with before with those various entities that may have been working in
Okay.
silos.
Now, do you think those lines of communication are better than, let's say, when you first took office?
Much better, only because of people who've worked in the DA's office and people who have worked in the police department talk frequently about how much better the communication is, the collaboration, and the camaraderie, the support that we give each other. There's no combative issues that we're really faced with right now.
Now, I know, like, for instance, one of your undersheriffs is Steve Keyhouse, who's my daughter's godfather, who you played a couple of games with Jackie,
Yes,
ice hockey, and he was the bureau chief of the East End DA's office.
right.
So you don't see maybe a lot of sheriffs with that kind of background, or undersheriff
Right.
with that kind of background. So that's got to be an invaluable resource for you,
Steve has been great. He was hired by my predecessor, Vinny
right?
DeMarco,
And you were
and
smart to keep him.
yes, very smart. And not only has he been a wealth of information, he's a very calm individual
Yes.
and able to look at things a lot differently than some of us, long-term law enforcement people
Right.
that may see a narrow view sometimes.
Right, and he's dealt with the grand jury.
Right.
He's dealt with orders of protection, of course. In fact, he took me under his wing when I was a young assistant DA.
Okay.
That's how I got to know him so
Right.
well. He was there a little bit before me,
Okay.
and I came in, and it was like shock because you go to law school. It's my first job, real job out of law school, and they give you a couple of little scripts how to handle a couple of, and they throw you to the wolves. The training is much better nowadays,
Right.
but when I went back there, it was you had to look to the older, more seasoned ADAs. And
Okay.
maybe it's like that with the police.
Yeah.
When they train you, They send you out there, and sometimes you're like, I'm not familiar with that particular scenario. What do I do here?
Right.
What kind of plea do I give? And Suffolk, we had a lot more discretion than Nassau.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if you know the DA's office in Nassau. If you have a case, the DA, the let's say the assistant DA in the courtroom, a supervisor makes the decision what the plea will be. Suffolk County here, they have a lot more discretion.
Okay.
At least that's what I've seen.
Right.
They still have supervisors, of course,
Right.
but you can talk to them and, all right, how about this deal? How about that deal? So that was something that Steve made things a little bit easier. Steve was that's how Steve is.
Right.
He would not just me, other ADAs. He would teach us, and like a mentor.
Right. Yes.
And
He is a good mentor.
yeah, he was. So, what kind of policies? You talked a little bit about things you've implemented. Well, let's go to, let's say, cashless bail, the bail laws. How has that affected you? Because obviously, what happens is now people that will be held on some kind of bail are not.
Right.
I'm not talking about the murders or maybe the serious rapes or whatever. Not that any rape is not serious, but I'm saying the serious crimes.
Correct.
But there are a lot of crimes that I would think are serious. You would think are serious, but they just let them go.
That when the legislation first passed, before it was actually enacted, because it was January 1st of 2020 when it
Right.
was effective, I was very much against it. When I had to release someone who was in for obscene sexual performance of a child, someone in for strangulation, and you know they should not be in our community.
Right.
If someone commits a misdemeanor, first time offense,
That's different.
made a mistake, they need to support their family. Yes, I agree. But some of these individuals, and we see it more in New York City, uh, horrific. Our census went from a little under 1,400 when I first took office January 2018. We were down to 1,000 by
That's a big
January
drop.
1st. During COVID, July of 2020, we were down to
Hmm.
425.
See, I think the Senate and the Assembly in New York, their heart might have been in the
Mhm.
right place, but you taking discretion away from judges. That's
Exactly.
the thing.
Which is something that I went up to Albany and spoke about with some other
Hmm.
sheriffs regarding the discretion. We have judges for a reason. Let's,
Right.
hold them accountable
I was
if you
going to say,
don't agree to them.
right, and you can vote them out. If
Right,
like in district court, a judge sits for 6 years. If you find out that he's letting people go left and right, or doing it the opposite,
right,
you can vote him out. It's not always that easy.
correct,
Judges are very political how they are picked, but you're taking the discretion away from a judge.
right,
And like you said, look at some of the crimes you just rattled off, where we'd be like, put some kind of bail.
right. And now you see, the retail theft that's going on,
Hmm.
under $1,000, and these individuals are continually, violating these business owners, small business owners, and the consumers affected. The business owners' insurance increases. As a society, we lose.
Right. Now you had mentioned a little bit before, but what agencies, Suffolk County PD, what agencies do you deal with? Probation office?
Probation, New York State Police, the medical examiner's office, of course, the district attorney's office, New York City Department of Corrections, New York City Police Department, Nassau County Police Department, Nassau County Sheriff's Office, Westchester County Sheriff's Office, the DEA, the FBI.
Wow.
We even work with the Secret Service. We started working with them about a month ago.
Now, how does it come to pass that you, let's say, deal with another jurisdiction? Is it because somebody from that jurisdiction might be in your jail?
Could be in my jail, or we could be working because we've identified someone in our jail that may have information on a case that could assist another jurisdiction.
Now, what kind of investigations? Like we all know, if somebody commits a crime, the Suffolk County Police get involved, the district attorney. How does the sheriff's office get involved? Like, let's say the Gilgo murders, for instance.
Right.
The police are searching. How does the sheriff's department, and what kind of cases does the sheriff's department get involved with?
So we got involved and we're part of the task force because we have the first human trafficking unit in any jail or prison in the United States. So we interview sex workers when they come into our custody. Now, we started this unit in September of 2018, and we were developing our own questions
Hmm.
because we had no clue as to a suspect, what he or she might have looked like, or even them. And so we started formulating questions. when the task force was created, everybody had their own little piece. So we were able to work with them regarding any potential individuals in our custody or people we might
That's
have had in our
interesting. Yeah.
custody. So that's where, and you got to remember when someone's in jail, they're in there for days, weeks, months, or maybe even years. And we're able to gain their trust while they're with us. If they're in the courtroom or they're with the police department, it's only a few hours that they're with them,
Right.
but they're with us for a longer period of time.
A captive audience.
Correct.
Right. That's interesting. And it should be intuitive, but that's something that you have them for a long period of time, and more likely to spill the beans or give you some information, like you said,
Right.
the sex workers. Obviously, sex workers are the ones that are killed in
Correct.
the Gilgo case.
Right.
So if someone comes in and might be give you some information,
Right.
and then it's good that you work with these, I guess, joint task forces, so
Correct.
that the information can flow.
And we were so successful, Nassau County asked us to come in, and I have my human trafficking team interviewing the sex workers in the Nassau County jail, and then we went to New York City
Hmm.
because you never know. I mean, he came from his architectural firm was in New York City,
Right.
and so the possibility of sex workers in the
Other
jail on
Jersey.
Rikers Island or
Right.
Nassau County.
We even heard Jersey or something.
We
Yeah.
heard Jersey, we heard Las Vegas, and we
Right.
also heard South Carolina.
And then when you're dealing with overstate lines, and the FBI can come in. So, like, what kind of cases would you deal with the FBI?
Well, the FBI was on the task force, so that's really in my tenure as a sheriff, the only dealings that I've ever had with them as far as being on the task force with them. So we really went, the DEA, we have several task force members, um, and also the DA's heroin task force, you know,
Hmm.
DA Ray Tierney's task force, we're on that
Right.
also.
I saw here on your bio that you went to the JFK School of Government at Harvard.
Yes.
You ever parked the car at Harvard Yard? So you're
Yes.
a Harvard guy. What was that experience like?
That was tremendous. One, just going through the entire application process to get into the program. But, when you pull up and you realize that this is a historic in
Right.
our nation, really globally, um, being able to, stay in the graduate dorms at
So
Harvard.
how old were you at the time when you
This
went there?
was, this is just maybe 10 years ago because I was a deputy commissioner on Rikers Island.
So you stayed on campus?
Stayed on campus,
Uh-huh.
and very, very interesting. So the courses were a week at a time,
Mhm.
and very interesting. And I was with so many classmates. I had about 110 classmates from like 89 different countries, and you
Wow.
got to learn so many things just from their perspective.
Wow. And I see that you also went to Dowling College. I taught there for a while.
Okay.
I was an adjunct professor when I was much younger, and then Long Island University. Um, but that's interesting. I didn't, like I said, I knew a bit about you. Obviously, I knew you worked at Rikers,
Right.
and then when I look at your bio, and there were some things in here, I see that you're a two-time cancer survivor. You had mentioned that
Right.
earlier.
Yeah.
What was How old were you when you had cancer?
Right. So I'm three-time now. I just recently
Wow.
had another battle. But in 1996, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I had to undergo chemotherapy and radiation right around the time you and I first met, too.
Okay.
And then
Wow.
6 years later, I had pancreatic cancer. I had to undergo a Whipple procedure. 3 years after that, I had developed a cardiac tamponade. They had to put a pericardial window in my heart. And then January this year, I was diagnosed with skin cancer and had to go through a couple of procedures to
You doing
get.
okay?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's a challenge, and you got to keep going forward.
Right.
My wife passed away 2 years ago with cancer.
Yes. Very
Cancer.
sorry.
Thank you. And I had known people through the years. This was the closest person I've ever lost. I lost an aunt who had cancer. But you just you got to move forward.
Right. And I try to take every day, enjoy it because I was healthy as an ox. I was 240. All I did was lift weights and play roller hockey.
Right.
And the next thing night sweats, loss of weight, and I have cancer.
So you were able to keep working and doing everything you needed to do.
Yeah, I had to stop work for a while because the treatment really debilitated me. And, to work in the jails on Rikers Island, I was very vulnerable. And also the illnesses that are
Mhm.
in jails uh, would have made me sicker. So, I had to go out on sick leave for a period of time and then return back to work.
Now, working at Rikers, and Rikers has the reputation of being a tough jail. Did you take some of those? I'm sure you did take some of those experiences and put things in place in Suffolk County, let's say, that you might have seen being handled in a way maybe you didn't agree with from Rikers, or felt we could do it better.
Right. One of the things that I guess I feel like I'm a little tougher because of the hardened experience I had on Rikers Island. So, I don't tolerate disrespect to staff. I don't tolerate my staff being abusive towards the incarcerated individuals. I think there should be a mutual respect both ways. And,
Right.
it was a little bit of a culture change for, I'm sure, my staff and for me because of what I known and what they have grown up with doing their entire lives as Suffolk County correction officers. And so, I had to really balance my perception and what I felt should be done as opposed to the culture that was here. I had to make sure that they were safe, make sure that they were better trained, make sure that they did their jobs to the best of their ability while ensuring that we'll provide proper services and see what we can do to help these men and women.
Now, early on, you said some sheriff's deputies patrol the roads, let's say, and then you have some that are corrections. Now, those are two different jobs,
Correct.
but they still work for you.
Right. It's unique office because correction officers work inside the jails and deputy sheriffs work in those other ancillary posts that I mentioned. So the unique thing is that they're two separate civil service exams.
Okay,
All right.
that was my
A
next question.
correction officer will go through 17 weeks of training. They're peace officers. The deputy sheriffs are police officers, so they enter the academy with every Suffolk County police class and go through the entire
I
8 month
see.
process
The
with
same
them.
as a police officer.
Correct. They go through the entire police academy with Suffolk County Police
Now,
Department.
what roads? I know they don't patrol all the roads,
No.
just the highways. The
Really, the highways out east, and of course, if they're on a highway
right.
going to and from work, if they see, a violation of the traffic law, they will pull someone over. But stationed on the highways, especially the LIE, are the Suffolk County Police Department.
I remember years ago, I was coming from Riverhead because I sometimes make that trip, CI to Riverhead or whatever, and I saw this guy tailing a sheriff's deputy. And I think he was bringing maybe a prisoner or two, and he was tailgating the guy. And I'm like, what is he thinking? So the sheriff's deputy pulled over, let the guy go, and then he pulled him over. So you're right. So even though that might not be their patrol,
Right.
they're law enforcement. If
Exactly.
they see something happen as they get off the expressway to go to CI,
Right.
they can make that arrest.
Right. If they see someone on their cell phone, if they see someone driving erratically, and you never know, it could be a medical emergency. It may
Right.
not have to be a violation. So, we are there to
Mm-hmm.
help.
Sure. Yeah, the out east. He said out
Right.
east.
Out east, we will assist the other jurisdictions, but for the most part, the highways are patrolled by the Suffolk County Police Department, and on the northern state and southern state
Mm-hmm.
are the New York State Police.
Okay. Now you said you were in Albany, I guess not that long ago, and that was to meet with the lawmakers, the
Correct.
legislators.
Right.
Now you get to work with them. I guess they ask you your advice about certain things because they have to pass laws.
Right. Some do and some don't. Assemblyman Steve Stern is probably the biggest person that will reach out to the office to get our opinion on various legislations. I do feel Senator Monica Martinez,
Mhm.
is another one also. But I think some of the things that we're trying to move the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office forward is why I go up and I speak to lawmakers. Because I'm an elected official,
Sure.
I do have that opportunity to lend my voice to various things that we need the state's assistance to try and do.
It's a 4-year term, right?
4 year
Okay.
term.
So I guess I gather that sometimes some of them are receptive to you and some aren't.
That's
What
what,
you said when you go up to, let's say, speak to the
correct.
legislature. Why do you think, and I'm not asking for any names, but why do you think some might not be receptive? Because look, if I was a legislator, I want to hear from the police, I want to hear from the
Right.
DA's office, I want to hear from the sheriff's department. Why would some not be that receptive?
I think those that more from New York City, where there's a more liberal attitude as
I see.
opposed to, a fairness and common sense attitude is what we should all have when it comes to, not only the individual committing the crime, but everybody tends to forget about the victims of these crimes. they've endured some
Right.
sort of trauma,
Hmm.
and I think that's what I try to push my agenda, consider keeping in consideration the victims of these crimes and what's reasonable for an individual to be returned back to our community.
See, what I like too is even though I know you belong to a political party, you don't let politics seep into this. You do what is best for Suffolk County, whether someone's a Republican, a Democrat, Independent, and that's important, isn't it?
It is to me. I've experienced hard loss of employment by sticking up to my values when I was the deputy commissioner in New York City. I did not agree with some of the things that de Blasio's administration wanted to push on the New York City Department of Correction. I fought back, and ultimately it cost me, I had to resign from my position. But I realize now at this point in my life that, I'm going to do what's right. I
Right.
think the people voted me in to do what's right, not because of a political affiliation. And my job is to keep people safe, no matter what political ideology enforces that, or
Sure.
in forced, or I guess I
Mm-hmm.
lost my words, but who really wants that agenda is what I believe in. We have
Right.
to keep our community safe. We have to want people to live in Suffolk County, shop in Suffolk County, raise their families in Suffolk County.
Yeah, that's very important. Um, Now, locally, I know you said you go to Albany. Locally, are the local legislators, the Suffolk County legislator, are they receptive to when you speak?
Yes, I think that especially our Suffolk County legislature,
Hmm.
uh, very much engaged with our office. We do have an intergovernmental coordinator in my office that really works with all of our elected officials. But when I have to have a conversation with them, it's very respectful, whether we agree to disagree. I am able to have these conversations with them.
Hmm. And of course, you work closely with Suffolk County DA Ray Tierney.
Great guy.
I know, Ray.
We have had a really great relationship, which I think has brought our two offices closer in not only working together, but supporting each other.
Are there term limits for your job?
There are no term limits for the Suffolk County Sheriff, so I can run until I decide not to run or
Hmm.
until I lose.
Do you? I'm not asking you for. Do you plan to be doing this for a while? You enjoy your
Uh,
job?
I do want to run for one more term. I do think that, at some point I realized that the reins have to be turned over to someone else.
Sure.
But I do have quite a few things that I need to accomplish, and I think if I'm reelected, I can accomplish those goals, and if the time is right, maybe look for something else to do.
I'll say maybe some other office. You got a wealth of experience here
Uh,
that you could build on. Now, the people that get hired, you said some like the court officers. I'm sorry, the corrections officers are civil servant.
right.
The ones that patrol the roads, they're not civil servants,
No,
but they
deputy
still
sheriffs,
are.
right? They are.
Okay, but they go
They
through the police academy. And
right. They
how do they get selected? How much say do you have, let's say, when someone is hired?
So I have all the say on every individual that's hired, but through civil service law, if there are issues in a particular band, I can only eliminate two people. So if I have five people that, their background checks, they're very sketchy, unfortunately, I cannot get rid of all five. If they were gang affiliations, if they were arrested multiple times, if they weren't of good character, there's only so many I can eliminate through the process. Um,
And when you say a band, what does that consist of?
So a band would be if you're in the 90s, or let's just say 100s. 50 people scored
Oh,
100
test scores.
test
Okay.
scores. I'm sorry, right?
Okay.
So they're in that band because of their test scores,
Hmm.
which complicates the issue.
Okay. Now, what is a typical day for Sheriff Toulon? You get up in the morning. Yeah. Where's your office?
So I have two offices, one in the Riverhead jail, and
Yeah.
one in the Yaphank jail. Depending on my schedule and what I'm going to do, I try to tour my facilities as frequently as I can, just to either talk to the staff. I also talk to the men and women that are
Hmm.
incarcerated, and just to get a feel of what's going on. I don't never want to lose touch of my roots
Right.
of being in jail. There's some days I'm in district court. Of course, being an elected official, there's many meetings that occur,
Hmm.
not necessarily political, but more about the operational part of the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, ensuring that we're within our budget. What are our staffing needs? What's the overtime? How many staff do I have out sick? What are the reasons why they're out sick? Are we? How is the training going? Where are we at in firearms training, chemical agents training, use of force
Hmm.
training, implicit bias training? So it's a constant task because I have to make sure that my executive staff are on their toes
Hmm.
also. So you have to babysit everyone.
Right. But it's a job you enjoy.
I do. I'm very, very fortunate to have this position. I do not take it for granted. I have not taken it for granted in almost 7 years that I've been in office, and I do love it. I love talking to the community, hearing what's going on, people that may have problems or issues that I can help solve. Maybe they're not law enforcement, but maybe I can, call a supervisor or a town council person from another town and just be able to assist and help someone.
And you have good people working for
I have a great staff. They're
you. Hmm.
really the cream of the crop for me.
Now you have two undersheriffs, correct?
Two on the sheriffs.
So they're like the vice president. In other words,
Yes,
if you're not able to be at a place, and let's say somebody high up needs to be,
right.
they fill that. Now they're at the same level.
Both undersheriffs at the same level. One is the first undersheriff, which is Steve Keyhouse,
Hmm.
because he's been there longer. And then the second undersheriff is Michael Katusko.
Okay.
And then I have two deputy undersheriffs.
Okay. So how many people are employed by the Suffolk County Sheriff?
Just a little under 1,300.
Wow.
So that's including deputy sheriffs, correction officers, and we don't call them civilian staff, we call them professional staff.
And what do they do?
There are ancillary in our accounting, our front desk, uh, secretarial staff. Um, we work in our help us with our
A
procurement.
lot of
Work in the
infrastructure.
kitchen. Yes,
What was it like running for office? Because this was the first job, the only job where you had to run, correct?
correct.
So other jobs, you took tests, you got hired,
Right.
right, and you did your job.
All appointed.
And I know you got into the race very late, but what was it like to have to to put yourself out there, in a sense, as a politician? I know it's the sheriff's office, but to run, to seek votes, to set up a campaign. What was that like? And you weren't, you wasn't like you were 30 or 40 years old when you first came
Right.
to this job. You
Yeah.
had a prior career.
Correct.
What was that like?
That was a little nerve-wracking. Calling people to ask for money
Yeah.
is a very challenging thing. And also selling yourself every venue, every event, every
Hmm.
meet the candidates. You have to sell yourself, and it's not something, I was accustomed to doing. Now I'm proud of my accomplishments. As I look back, even from a young correction officer in 1982, and I feel like I can talk about jail, prison, or law enforcement to any particular group, honestly, with transparency, and really let them know what we're doing. Our failures too. We're not a perfect agency, but we do try to do the best we can for our community. But putting yourself out there, and also is putting your family out there too.
Right.
Because people will make up things about you and your family members just to sway a certain voting block one way or the other.
That must have been difficult because in your prior job, your family was your family. Wasn't a big. Then when you run for office and you put yourself out there and you're under scrutiny
Right.
that you weren't before, that's got to be, you know, not
It,
easy to deal with.
no, it was very challenging. I remember one little commercial on YouTube was a fact that my opponent's side said that I hadn't voted in Suffolk County for 2 years, and it was only because as a deputy commissioner I had to live in New York City,
I see.
so I had to register in New York
So
City,
you
and
couldn't vote out here.
so right, I voted, but I just didn't vote in Suffolk County. I voted in New York City, where
Hmm.
I had really a dual residence, but you had to have a primary residence in New York City, so I had to live there most of the time.
Running for re-election, that second campaign, I guess you learned the good and the bad, the ugly, the first time around.
Right.
How was that second run?
Second one was a lot easier. People knew me. People had confidence in
And you had
me.
a record to run on.
Right, and the fundraising was easier. The going to meet the candidates, there were more people that knew of me because of the visibility. The biggest problem was the political party. I'm in. There was a wave, and so
Sure.
whether I was doing a great job or not, because there was some very good candidates that got swept up in the wave, and I was fortunate to survive it.
Hmm. You said you'd like to have another term. So if that was the case, you would have been in office 12 years.
Right.
What do you want to see? And again, it's still early, you're not done, but as like a legacy, what would you like people to take from your time as the sheriff of Suffolk County?
One, as I always say, uh, that we're the best damn sheriff's office in the country, and I use that term very strongly because I really
I can
feel we
tell.
are. I think creating a rehabilitation model for men and women who are incarcerated and continuing to assist them when they leave our custody, that they'll never be left behind because there'll always be a support group as long as I'm the sheriff. And then on the other front, that we're hard on crime. We created a correction intelligence center where we have now almost 60 partners throughout the United States, including the UK, Australia, Dominican Republic, El Salvador, and Puerto Rico,
Wow.
where we're sharing information with all, we're the hub, and we're receiving information and disseminating information about where possible contraband introductions in facilities, things that are going on that staff should be looking at. And I think hopefully that, I work to keep our community safe, but still was compassionate enough to help those men and women that may have fallen down, and we can help them get back on the right path.
How did that start? You said you just rattled off a bunch of countries that we deal with, that you deal with. How did that come about? That wasn't always the case.
No, we started that about a year ago, our Corrections Intelligence Center, and it's really by networking, meeting different people, talking about what we're doing. My staff goes to conferences throughout the United States. They just went to a NICA conference up in Geneva, New York. By the time they left, 29 people and six more agencies signed on to being partners with our Corrections Intelligence Center,
Now, how do you get another? You said Australia,
Australia.
El Salvador, of course. How do you approach those kinds of countries, let's say, and say, look, I'm the sheriff of Suffolk County, and this is what I'd like to see? How do they react?
So how that relationship came about, I was speaking at a conference in Louisiana. At the conference was a person from Australia. She approached me afterward because she worked in the prisons in Australia, and I told her what we were doing, and she was actually a Winston Churchill fellow that was writing a paper included our Corrections Intelligence Center
Wow.
on in her paper, and more importantly, we were able to develop that relationship.
I guess just by putting yourself out there and speak like that. Look, if you didn't speak there, you might not have met that woman.
Right,
And by putting yourself out there by speaking, you're more visible,
right.
and the people take you have more credibility.
And I think it's a sense of pride in what we're doing because we're actually giving actionable information to jails in Texas and Oregon and Chicago and Indiana, places we probably would have never explored a few years ago, but now we're all communicating and trying to get onto the same page.
Now, with your busy schedule, how do you find time to do things like play hockey? We got to go to a puck shoot.
Right.
I think we
Yes.
both need a little work.
Yes.
Right?
Uh-huh.
I think I told you I took a lesson with Barbara Williams,
Oh, okay, great.
and she worked me hard.
Uh,
She said I did very well, and then she said to me, "Why are you sweating?" I said, "Barbara, I'm almost 60 years old.
Right.
This is not what I do every day,
Right.
but I go out there, and I know the sheriff has some like the lawmen
Right.
or the sheriff's teams. Your son
Right.
plays on one of those teams,
Yes,
right?
the lawman, correct.
And now what does he do?
Right now he works for the Suffolk County Water Authority. He's
Okay,
a line inspector.
okay, but he plays on that team, and
Yes.
yeah, I
Yeah.
know a lot of some police officers. You were talking
Right.
about Sal played on
On
one
the
of the
lawman
teams.
also, yes.
Yeah.
But our sheriff's team, we're actually going to Pittsburgh in a few weeks, and we try to have a lot of charity games to raise money for various charities in Suffolk County. We just played New York Cancer and Blood. They have a foundation where uh, patients that have cancer
Yes.
that
I think I think you played them a while back. Was it the Dix Hills rink?
right, we
I
played
came
them
down
four
to a
times
game. In
already.
fact, my wife was alive and she wasn't
Okay.
doing well, but I think Kelly Masillo played,
Yes.
and each
Yeah.
one had they had like something to remember
Right.
or to
Who they were playing for?
right. And I remember I think it was Cancer and Blood because one of the guys on the ice, his father's a cancer doctor
Oh yes, yeah, yeah.
who played
Dr.
lacrosse with
Avento
Danny.
and Dr. Cerrone.
That's it.
Right.
Dr. Cerrone's
Dr.
son.
Dr. Joe Cerrone.
Dr. Cerrone's son
Right.
played lacrosse, and I know him. He
Okay.
played, and I think he was there that day.
Yeah.
And I think two of the guys that were there that did very well were lacrosse players,
Okay.
but also very good hockey. Listen, we got to wrap it up. My producer's looking at me, but listen, I really want to thank you for coming on.
Thank
You're doing a fantastic job. I'm honored to have you here. Like I said, honored to call you a friend, and Suffolk County is the better for you being in that uniform, even
Thank
though
you.
you're not in it today.
Thank you
But
very
thank
much,
you very
sir.
much, Errol.
Thank
Have
you.
a good